The day had been long and tiring for Rosa Mendez. Her hands were rough and stained with grease after 12 hours of fixing engines, changing oil, and dealing with rusty bolts that refused to budge. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, Rosa wiped her hands on an old rag and looked around her small garage with a sense of satisfaction. Just one more day in the books, she mumbled to herself as she began putting away her tools. Each wrench and socket went back into its designated spot in the large red toolbox that had once belonged to her father. The familiar ritual brought her comfort after a hectic day. Rosa's garage sat on the edge of town, about 15 minutes from Fort Braxton Military Base. Her little repair shop wasn't fancy, just a 2-bay garage with faded signs and concrete floors worn smooth from years of use. But locals knew that nobody could diagnose an engine problem faster than Rosa, and her prices were fair. That reputation had kept her small business alive even when the big chain auto shops moved into town. As Rosa flipped through her appointment book for tomorrow, she calculated the day's earnings in her head. It had been a good day. Mrs. Patel's transmission work had paid well, and the Henderson family finally settled their outstanding bill. Maybe this month she could actually put some money aside instead of just scraping by. Enough for tonight, she said, stretching her back until she heard a satisfying pop. Rosa reached for the light switch, ready to head home to her small apartment where a hot shower and leftover pasta waited. That's when she heard the sound of tires on gravel outside. Rosa frowned. The closed sign had been up for over an hour. She walked to the garage door and saw a black SUV with government plates pulling into her lot. The vehicle was spotless, clearly well-maintained, but Rosa's trained ear caught the faint metallic ping that didn't belong. "We're closed," she called out as the driver's door opened. "I open at 8 tomorrow if you want to." The words died in her throat as a woman in a military uniform stepped out. Rosa didn't know much about military ranks, but the stars on this woman's uniform told her enough. "This wasn't just any officer. Are you still open?" the woman asked, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of giving orders. "I was just closing up," Rosa replied, suddenly aware of her oil-stained coveralls and messy ponytail. "Like I said, I can take a look first thing tomorrow." The woman walked closer, her posture perfect, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. "I'm General Catherine Hayes. I understand it's late, but I'd rather not drive this vehicle back to base if there's something wrong with it. I've been hearing an unusual sound whenever I take a right turn. Could be nothing, but in my experience, strange noises rarely fix themselves." Rosa hesitated. She was tired, hungry, and had promised herself she'd stop taking last-minute jobs, but turning away a general seemed unwise, especially since most of her customers had some connection to Fort Braxton. "What kind of noise are we talking about?" Rosa asked, professional curiosity getting the better of her. "A sort of clicking followed by a scrape. Started this afternoon on my way back from a meeting in the Capitol." Rosa's eyebrows rose slightly. The Capitol was 3 hours away. "And you drove it all the way back like that?" A hint of a smile crossed General Hayes's face. "I've flown damaged helicopters through worse, but I'd prefer not to push my luck with the motor pool's newest vehicle." Rosa sighed and flipped the lights back on. "Pull it into Bay 2. I'll take a quick look. But I'm not promising anything tonight. If it needs parts, you'll have to come back." Relief flashed across the general's face. "Thank you. I appreciate it." Rosa watched as Hayes drove the SUV into the garage. The sound was more noticeable inside, a distinct click-scrape that came from underneath the vehicle. Rosa had heard similar sounds before, and they usually meant trouble. "How long have you been working as a mechanic?" General Hayes asked as Rosa gathered her tools. "All my life, more or less," Rosa answered, pulling on a work-light headband. "My dad owned this place. I used to help him after school, learned everything hands-on. Took over when he passed 10 years ago." "You run this place by yourself?" There was genuine curiosity in the general's voice. "Can't afford help," Rosa said simply. "Not steady anyway. Sometimes my nephew comes in on weekends when it's busy." She knelt down beside the SUV. "Mind starting her up?" "I want to hear that noise while the engine's running." The general got back into the driver's seat and started the engine. Rosa listened carefully, then motioned for her to turn it off. "I need to get underneath. This might take a bit." Rosa rolled her creeper board out and lay down on it, then pushed herself under the SUV. The underside was clean and well-maintained, as expected for a military vehicle. She moved her light methodically across the undercarriage, checking the exhaust system, drive shaft, and suspension components. Everything looked normal at first glance, but Rosa had learned long ago that normal at first glance was how problems hid themselves. She checked each component more thoroughly, running her fingers along connections and joints, feeling for anything loose. That's when her fingers found something that didn't belong. Nestled against the frame, nearly invisible unless you were looking for it, was a small black box about the size of a matchbox. It wasn't a factory part. Rosa knew every component that belonged on these government SUVs. This had been added later, attached with industrial-strength magnets and what looked like professional installation. Rosa's first thought was that it might be some kind of military tracking device, something the motor pool had installed on all their vehicles, but the way it was hidden suggested otherwise. Her second thought made her stomach clench. This looked exactly like the tracking devices she'd seen in crime shows. Someone was tracking the general's movements. Someone who shouldn't be. Rosa carefully examined the device without disturbing it. No wires connected to the vehicle's electrical system, which meant it had its own power source. Probably GPS-enabled. Definitely not standard equipment. She pushed herself out from under the SUV, her mind racing. Should she say something? What if she was wrong? What if this was some classified military thing she wasn't supposed to know about? The general was standing by the workbench checking her phone. She looked up when Rosa emerged. "Find anything?" she asked. Rosa hesitated only a moment. "Ma'am, there's something attached to your undercarriage that doesn't belong there." The general's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. "What kind of something?" "A small black box, professionally mounted, hidden where most mechanics wouldn't spot it during routine maintenance." Rosa wiped her hands on her rag. "I've never seen factory equipment installed that way." General Hayes was silent for a long moment. Then she asked very carefully, "Could you show me?" Rosa nodded and pulled out her phone. She slid back under the vehicle and took several clear photos of the device and its placement. When she came back out, she showed the pictures to the general. The change in Hayes was immediate and alarming. The woman went completely still, her face draining of color. For a moment, she seemed to stop breathing altogether. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Rosa asked, concerned by the sudden transformation. "Don't move," the general whispered, her eyes locked on the phone screen. "Don't say anything else." The command in her voice froze Rosa in place. General Hayes slowly reached for her own phone, her movements deliberate and controlled. She typed something quickly, then looked directly at Rosa. "I need you to listen very carefully," she said, her voice now barely audible. "What you've found isn't just a tracking device. It's evidence that someone is monitoring my movements without authorization. This is a matter of national security now." Rosa felt her heart rate quicken. This wasn't the kind of problem she could fix with a wrench. "What should I do?" she asked, keeping her voice low. "Nothing. Not yet." The general glanced at the garage doors. "I've contacted a security team. They'll be here in 20 minutes. Until then, we act normal. If someone is watching this place, I don't want them to know we've discovered their device." Rosa nodded, suddenly aware of how exposed the garage felt with its large windows and open doors. She had never thought of her workplace as vulnerable before, but now every shadow seemed to hide watching eyes. "Should I close up?" she asked. "Casually," the general replied, "like you're just finishing for the night. Then we'll wait." Rosa moved around the garage, shutting down equipment and closing the bay doors as she would normally. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing. How had she gotten involved in whatever this was? All she'd wanted was to fix cars and make a living. As she closed the last bay door, she glanced at General Hayes, who was calmly leaning against the workbench as if they were just discussing a routine repair. Their eyes met, and in that moment Rosa knew her simple life had just become vastly more complicated. 20 minutes felt like forever, as Rosa and General Hayes waited in the now-closed garage. Rosa had offered coffee from her ancient pot in the corner office, but the general had declined, her eyes constantly moving between her phone and the windows. "You said you've worked here all your life?" General Hayes asked, breaking the tense silence. Rosa nodded, grateful for the distraction. "Born and raised in this town. My dad opened this garage back in '85. I grew up playing with socket wrenches instead of dolls." "Your father taught you well," the general said, glancing at the perfectly organized tool wall. "Not many people would have spotted that device." Rosa shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I just pay attention to details. Cars are pretty simple once you understand them. They don't lie or try to fool you. If something's wrong, there's always a reason for it. A faint smile crossed the general's face. I wish people were that straightforward. Before Rosa could respond, headlights swept across the front of the garage. Both women tensed, but General Hayes relaxed slightly after checking her phone. That's them, she said, moving toward the side door. 3 unmarked black SUVs pulled into the lot, parking in a way that blocked the garage from street view. 6 people emerged, 4 men and 2 women, all wearing civilian clothes but moving with military precision. One of the men approached General Hayes, directly while the others began setting up equipment around the garage. Perimeter, ma'am. The man nodded, respectfully to Hayes. His buzz-cut and rigid posture screamed, military despite his ordinary jeans and jacket. We've secured the perimeter. Tech team is ready to sweep the vehicle. Agent Donovan, this is Rosa Mendez, the general said, gesturing toward Rosa. She discovered the device during a routine inspection. The man turned to Rosa, his expression giving nothing away. Ms. Mendez, I understand you've been working on the general's vehicle. Did you touch the device you found? No, sir, Rosa answered, straightening her posture automatically. I took photos but left it exactly where I found it. Good, Donovan replied. We need to check the rest of your garage for additional surveillance. Standard procedure. Rosa looked around at her small shop, suddenly seeing it through different eyes. The thought of someone planting listening devices in her workspace made her skin crawl. Go ahead, she said. Check everything. 2 team members entered carrying equipment cases. They opened them to reveal what looked like handheld scanner wands and other electronic devices Rosa didn't recognize. They began a methodical sweep of the entire garage. Another agent approached with a tablet. Ms. Mendez, I need you to look at some photos. Tell me if you've seen any of these people around your garage in the past week. Rosa studied the tablet as he flipped through about 20 photographs. Men and women of various ages and appearances. She didn't recognize any of them. Sorry, she said. None of them look familiar. But I get a lot of customers. I can't remember every face. The agent nodded without comment and moved away. Meanwhile, others had rolled General Hayes's SUV onto a portable lift they'd brought with them and were examining it from underneath. The device is still active, one of the techs announced. Military grade. Broadcasting to a satellite relay. Don't remove it yet, General Hayes ordered. I want to know who's on the receiving end. Rosa watched the operation with growing unease. Her simple auto shop had transformed into something from a spy movie in less than an hour. Agent Donovan must have noticed her expression because he stepped closer. I know this is overwhelming, Ms. Mendez, he said, his voice lower, but you did the right thing. The general's work is sensitive. This breach could have had serious consequences. Who would do something like this? Rosa asked. That's what we're going to find out, he replied. But first we need to make sure you're not in danger. Rosa hadn't considered that angle. Me? Why would I be in danger? Because you discovered the device, General Hayes said, joining their conversation. Whoever placed it now knows their operation is compromised. They might assume you saw more than you did. A chill ran down Rosa's spine. Her garage had always felt safe, even when she worked late nights alone. Now every shadow seemed threatening. One of the scanning team approached. Ma'am, we've completed our sweep. The garage is clean. No additional surveillance devices. But we found these outside. He held up a small evidence bag containing what looked like tiny black pellets. What are those? Rosa asked. Micro cameras, Agent Donovan explained. They were positioned to monitor the entrance to your garage. Probably activated by motion sensors whenever a vehicle entered or exited. Rosa felt her stomach drop. How long have they been there? Based on dust accumulation, at least a week, the tech replied. Maybe longer. General Hayes exchanged a meaningful look with Donovan. They've been watching this location specifically. This wasn't random. I don't understand, Rosa said, struggling to keep up. Why would anyone watch my garage? The general's expression hardened. Not your garage, Ms. Mendez. They were watching to see who brought their vehicles here. Specifically, military personnel. Understanding dawned on Rosa. Because Fort Braxton is nearby and a lot of my customers are military families. Exactly. Hayes nodded. You have a reputation for being good and affordable. The perfect place for someone to gather intelligence on military movement patterns. Who goes where? How often? What vehicles they drive. Agent Donovan stepped away to take a call, returning moments later with a grim expression. Ma'am, we've traced the signal. It's bouncing through multiple relays, but the origination point is domestic, not foreign. The general's face darkened. An inside job, then. Just as I suspected. Rosa looked between them, feeling increasingly out of her depth. What does all this mean? Hayes studied her for a long moment, as if making a difficult decision. Ms. Mendez, what I'm about to tell you is classified. Under normal circumstances, you would never be privy to this information, but these aren't normal circumstances. She gestured toward a pair of stools by the workbench. Rosa sat down, her legs suddenly feeling weak. For the past 6 months, Hayes began, I've been leading an internal investigation into information leaks at Fort Braxton. Classified deployment schedules, security protocols, personnel assignments, all finding their way into unauthorized hands. We narrowed it down to someone with high-level access but couldn't identify the source. And now someone's tracking you, Rosa said, connecting the dots. Because you're getting too close. Yes, Hayes confirmed. But they made a mistake coming to your shop. They underestimated your attention to detail. One of the tech team approached with a laptop. General, we've managed to access the device's transmission history. It's been active for 3 days, tracking all of the general's movements. Since my trip to Washington, Hayes muttered. That meeting wasn't on my official schedule. Someone had inside information. Rosa watched as the team continued their work, feeling strangely detached from the scene unfolding in her garage. Just hours ago, her biggest concern had been ordering new brake pads for Mrs. Patel's car. Now she was in the middle of what sounded like espionage. What happens now? She asked. General Hayes straightened her uniform jacket. Now we use their surveillance against them. We'll leave the tracking device in place, but feed it false information. Meanwhile, my team will trace the signal back to its source. And what about me? Rosa asked, the reality of her situation sinking in. What am I supposed to do? Hayes exchanged a look with Donovan before answering. That depends on you, Ms. Mendez. We have 2 options. Option 1, we remove all traces of our presence here tonight. You sign several non-disclosure agreements and go back to your life pretending none of this ever happened. And option 2? Rosa asked, sensing there was more. Option 2 is more complicated, Hayes said carefully. We believe your garage has been used as an unwitting surveillance point for some time. That means any military personnel who bring their vehicles here could be compromised. We need someone on the inside, someone who can check those vehicles for similar devices without raising suspicion. Rosa blinked, understanding slowly dawning. You want me to work with you? To spy on my own customers? Not spy, Donovan corrected quickly. Protect. Many of your customers are military families. If someone is using your business to gather intelligence, they're putting those families at risk. Rosa stood up and walked to the window, looking out at her small parking lot now filled with government vehicles. Her father had built this garage from nothing, working his fingers to the bone to create something he could be proud of. He taught her that integrity was everything in their business. People trusted you with their vehicles, sometimes their only valuable possession. I need some time to think, she said quietly. I understand this is a lot to process, General Hayes said, her voice softer than before. But I need your decision tonight. Security considerations don't allow for delay. Rosa turned back to face them. If I say no? If I just want to go back to fixing cars and forget this happened? Then we'll respect that, Hayes said. You'll sign the non-disclosure agreements and we'll develop an alternative strategy. But your garage may become off-limits to military personnel for their own protection. That would mean losing almost half her customers, maybe more once word got around that military families couldn't bring their vehicles to her. The business her fath built might not survive. Rosa looked around at the garage, at the tools on the wall, the framed picture of her father standing proudly in front of the shop on opening day, the handwritten ledger where she still recorded all transactions just as he had taught her. If I help you, she said slowly, what exactly would I be doing? The next morning, Rosa opened her garage at exactly 8 a.m. just like any other day. She flipped the sign to open, turned on the lights, and started the coffee pot. To anyone passing by, it looked like business as usual. No one would guess that 3 unmarked vans were parked 2 blocks away, filled with surveillance equipment monitoring every vehicle that approached her shop. No one would notice the nearly invisible earpiece Rosa wore. Disguised as a regular wireless earbud, many mechanics used to listen to music while they worked. Last night had stretched until nearly 3 a.m. After Rosa had agreed to help, General Hayes and Agent Donovan had walked her through what would happen next. They'd removed the tracking device from the General's SUV but left similar-looking decoys around the garage, non-functioning replicas that would appear suspicious if found. During a routine search, we need to flush them out, Donovan had explained. Make them think their operation is still active while we track them back to the source. Rosa had signed more papers than she'd ever seen in her life. Non-disclosure agreements, temporary civilian contractor forms, even an agreement that gave the government permission to monitor her garage for the next 30 days. Just remember, Hayes had told her before leaving, act normal. Do your job. If you find anything suspicious on any vehicle, mark it with the UV pen we gave you and mention the customer's name when you next use the landline phone. We'll handle the rest. The bell above the door jingled, pulling Rosa from her thoughts. Her first customer of the day, Mrs. Chen with her ancient Toyota pickup that needed new spark plugs. Morning, Rosa. The elderly woman smiled. You look tired today. Late night? Rosa managed a natural smile. Just catching up on some paperwork. You know how it is. As she worked on Mrs. Chen's truck, Rosa had to fight the urge to check underneath for tracking devices. This was a civilian vehicle owned by a retired schoolteacher, hardly a target for espionage. Still, her eyes kept drifting toward the undercarriage. Get a grip, she muttered to herself. Not every car is bugged. The morning passed with routine jobs, oil changes, a brake pad replacement, diagnosing a check engine light. By noon, Rosa had almost convinced herself that last night had been some bizarre dream. Then Lieutenant Wilson from the base showed up with his personal Jeep. Having trouble with the transmission again, Rosa asked, wiping her hands on a shop rag as she approached. The lieutenant nodded. Yeah, it's still slipping when I shift into third. Thought you fixed it last time. I adjusted it but told you it might need a complete rebuild, Rosa reminded him, gesturing him to pull the vehicle into an empty bay. Let me take another look. As she slid underneath the Jeep, Rosa's heart was pounding. This was the first military personnel to visit since last night. She carefully examined every inch of the undercarriage, looking for anything that didn't belong. The transmission problem was obvious. A leaking seal that needed replacement, but there were no unusual devices attached to the frame or exhaust system. Rosa almost felt disappointed as she pushed herself out from under the vehicle. Good news and bad news, Lieutenant. I found your problem, leaking transmission seal. Bad news is I'll need to order the part. Should be here by tomorrow afternoon. How much is this going to cost me? Wilson sighed. As Rosa wrote up the estimate, a black SUV pulled into the lot. Her stomach tightened when she recognized Agent Donovan behind the wheel, dressed in plain clothes. This wasn't part of the plan. They were supposed to maintain distance unless absolutely necessary. Excuse me a sec, Rosa told the lieutenant, walking outside to meet Donovan. I thought we were keeping communication to the phone line. Donovan kept his voice casual, as if they were discussing a routine repair. Change of plans. We intercepted some chatter. Your garage is going to get a special visitor today. Someone connected to our investigation. I wanted to give you a heads up in person. Who? Rosa asked, trying not to look nervous as she pretended to show Donovan something on her clipboard. Colonel Frank Reeves. He's bringing in his wife's car. Supposedly has an engine knock. He's never been to your garage before. And suddenly he's bypassing the base's auto shop for a minor issue. Rosa's mind raced. You think he's the one behind this? We don't know yet, Donovan admitted. But he's on our short list of suspects. He has access to the leaked information and was stationed overseas in regions where that information would be valuable. What do you want me to do? Rosa asked. Just what we discussed. Check the vehicle thoroughly. Act normal. If he's trying to plant something in your garage, we'll catch him. If he's just getting his car fixed, no harm done. Rosa nodded, trying to look confident despite the churning in her stomach. I can do that. Donovan returned to his vehicle while Rosa finished up with Lieutenant Wilson. She had just walked him out when a sleek silver Mercedes pulled into the lot. A tall man in his 50s wearing civilian clothes but with a military haircut stepped out. Are you Rosa Mendez? He asked, his voice pleasant but commanding. Rosa nodded. That's me. What can I help you with today? Colonel Frank Reeves. He extended his hand. My wife's car has been making an odd knocking sound. The guys at the motor pool on base are backed up for weeks. I heard you do good work. His handshake was firm, his smile reaching his eyes. Nothing about him seemed suspicious or threatening. If Donovan hadn't warned her, Rosa would have just seen him as another customer. Happy to take a look, she said, gesturing to an empty bay. When did the knocking start? As Reeves described the problem, Rosa listened for inconsistencies or mechanical impossibilities, signs that he was making up an issue as a pretext. But his description was detailed and accurate, exactly what you'd expect from someone with a genuine engine problem. Mind if I take a test drive first? Rosa asked. Sometimes I can diagnose better when I hear it myself. Go right ahead, Reeves handed her the keys. I can wait in your office if that's okay. Rosa hesitated. The office contained her father's old desk, her business records, and the landline phone that was now connected to Donovan's surveillance team. Actually, the waiting area is more comfortable, she said, pointing to a small corner with a coffee machine and a few chairs. Coffee's fresh. Reeves nodded and moved toward the waiting area while Rosa got into the Mercedes. As she pulled out of the garage, she whispered, Colonel Reeves is here with his wife's car. He wants to wait in my office. I directed him to the waiting area instead. She knew the microphone in her earpiece would pick up her words and relay them to Donovan. There was no response, but she hadn't expected one. The Mercedes drove beautifully, but there was indeed a knocking sound when the engine reached higher RPMs. Rosa drove around the block twice, confirming her initial diagnosis, likely a loose timing chain tensioner, a common issue with this model. When she returned to the garage, Reeves was sitting in the waiting area scrolling through his phone. He looked up as she parked the car. Find anything? Sounds like a timing chain tensioner, Rosa said, popping the hood. Let me check a few things to confirm. As she worked, Rosa kept Reeves in her peripheral vision. He stayed in the waiting area, occasionally looking at his phone. Nothing in his behavior suggested he was there for any reason other than getting his wife's car fixed. Rosa carefully examined the engine, confirming her diagnosis. Then she moved to check underneath the vehicle, sliding onto her creeper board and pushing herself under the Mercedes. The undercarriage was clean and well-maintained, with no obvious signs of tampering or attached devices. Rosa was beginning to think Donovan's intelligence was wrong when she noticed something odd about one of the heat shields near the exhaust system. It was slightly newer than the surrounding components, the metal less discolored from heat. Using her flashlight, she examined it more closely and found tiny screws that weren't factory standard. Heart-pounding, Rosa carefully loosened one screw and peered behind the heat shield. There it was. A device similar to the one she'd found on General Hayes's SUV, but smaller and more sophisticated. This one was hardwired into the vehicle's electrical system, drawing power directly rather than using a battery. Rosa carefully replaced the screw and continued her inspection as if nothing was wrong. She slid out from under the car, her mind racing. Was Reeves monitoring his own vehicle? Or was someone monitoring him? Good news and bad news, Rosa said, approaching Reeves with a practiced smile. I found your problem. It is the timing chain tensioner. Bad news is, it's a bigger job than I can handle today. Would need to keep the car overnight. Parts should be about $400 plus labor. Reeves frowned. My wife needs the car tomorrow for a doctor's appointment in the city. Is there any way to expedite it? Tell you what, Rosa said, thinking quickly. I have another appointment this afternoon, but I could work late tonight if you can leave the car. It would be ready first thing in the morning. That would be perfect, Reeves smiled, relief evident on his face. I really appreciate it. After Reeves called his wife for a ride and left, Rosa waited exactly 5 minutes before picking up the landline phone and dialing her parts supplier, the code they'd established for contacting Donovan. Pete's Auto Parts, she said clearly. I need to order a timing chain tensioner kit for a Mercedes C300. Customer name is Colonel Frank Reeves. 20 minutes later, Donovan called back on the same line. Found something? He asked without preamble. Yes, Rosa confirmed. Similar device to the General's, but hardwired into the electrical system, hidden behind a recently replaced heat shield. There was a pause before Donovan responded. This changes things. Reeves might not be our perpetrator. He might be another target. Or it could be misdirection. Either way, don't touch the device. We'll send a team tonight after you close. He's expecting the car back tomorrow morning, Rosa reminded him. We'll make it work, Donovan assured her. Just finish your day normally. And Rosa, good work. As Rosa hung up, she felt a strange mixture of pride and unease. She'd never imagined her mechanical skills would be used for something like this. Part of her wished she could go back to just fixing cars and not worrying about spies and surveillance, but another part, a part that sounded surprisingly like her father's voice, reminded her that she'd always fixed things for people. Maybe this was just fixing things on a bigger scale. She picked up her wrench and moved on to her next appointment, wondering what else the day might bring. Rosa couldn't sleep that night. She tossed and turned in her small apartment above the laundromat, her mind racing with questions. Who was behind the surveillance devices? Was Colonel Reeves involved, or was he another victim? What had she gotten herself into? By the time her alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 a.m., she had barely slept 3 hours. She dragged herself out of bed, made a pot of coffee strong enough to strip paint, and tried to focus on the day ahead. According to the plan Donovan had outlined during their midnight call, Rosa was to open the garage as usual. Colonel Reeves' Mercedes would be parked outside, apparently ready for pickup. Donovan's team had worked through the night, documenting the surveillance device, installing their own monitoring equipment, and completing the legitimate repair Rosa had diagnosed. Remember, Donovan had told her, as far as Reeves knows, you just fixed his wife's car. Act accordingly. Rosa arrived at the garage at 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes earlier than usual. As promised, the Mercedes was parked in her lot, keys in the drop box. A manila envelope was tucked under the driver's seat with "eyes only," written in bold letters. Rosa opened it quickly, scanning the handwritten note inside. Device tracked to receiver 2 miles north of base. Signal encrypted, military grade. Reeves under surveillance for at least 3 months. Original repair completed. Invoice attached. Usual price plus 15% for after-hours work. Rosa crumpled the note and shoved it into her pocket, making a mental note to burn it later. She reviewed the invoice, which detailed the legitimate repair work, and placed it in an envelope for Reeves. At precisely 7:30 a.m., a black sedan pulled into the lot. Colonel Reeves stepped out, looking fresh and alert despite the early hour. "Morning," he called cheerfully. "You're a lifesaver for getting this done overnight." Rosa forced a smile, reminding herself to act normal. Just part of the service. The timing chain tensioner was definitely the issue. Replaced it and adjusted the timing. Should run smooth as silk now. She handed him the invoice and keys. "Take it for a quick test drive if you want. Make sure it's running right." Reeves glanced at the invoice, nodding in approval. That seems fair for an emergency job. He pulled out his wallet and handed her his credit card. "No need for a test drive. I trust your work." As Rosa processed the payment, she studied Reeves carefully. Did he have any idea his car had been bugged? Was he somehow involved? Or just another pawn in this game of espionage? "Your wife should have no problems getting to her appointment," Rosa said, returning his card and receipt. "But if you notice anything else, bring it right back." "Will do," Reeves smiled. "Thanks again for the rush job. I'll be sure to recommend you to folks at the base." Rosa watched him drive away, wondering if she would ever know the truth about Colonel Frank Reeves. Her contemplation was interrupted by the ringing of the landline phone. "Mendez Auto Repair," she answered. "Morning, Rosa." It was General Hayes. "Got a minute to talk?" "Yes, ma'am," Rosa replied, glancing around to ensure she was alone. "I wanted to personally thank you for your help with Colonel Reeves's vehicle," Hayes said. "The information we gathered last night is proving extremely valuable." "Was Reeves involved?" Rosa couldn't help asking. "No," Hayes said firmly. "In fact, he's been unwittingly carrying classified information to unauthorized parties. The device in his car was tracking his movements and recording conversations. Reeves chairs several security committees and often discusses sensitive matters with his wife while driving." Rosa felt a chill. So someone was using his car as a listening post? "Exactly," Hayes confirmed. "And he's not the only one. Based on signal analysis from the device in his vehicle, we've identified at least 7 other similar transmitters at various locations around the base, including my garage," Rosa said quietly. "Yes," Hayes acknowledged. "Your garage was being used as a collection point. They likely assumed a civilian mechanic wouldn't notice their equipment." Rosa thought about the dozens of military personnel who brought their vehicles to her shop each month. How long had this been going on under her nose? "What happens now?" she asked. "That's why I'm calling," Hayes said, her voice taking on an official tone. "We need your continued assistance. More vehicles will be coming to your garage over the next few days. Some with legitimate issues, others as part of our investigation." "Can we count on you?" Rosa hesitated. She had already stepped into a world she barely understood. Part of her wanted to back away, to return to the simplicity of fixing engines and changing oil. But another part, the part that had always taken pride in solving difficult problems, was intrigued. "I'll help," she said finally, "but I need to know what I'm getting into. How dangerous is this?" There was a brief silence before Hayes responded. "I won't lie to you, Ms. Mendez. Whoever is behind this has access to classified information and sophisticated equipment. They wouldn't hesitate to protect their operation if they felt threatened." "That's not very reassuring," Rosa muttered. "Which is why we've assigned round-the-clock surveillance to your garage and your apartment," Hayes continued. "Agent Donovan and his team will be nearby at all times. You're not in this alone." The bell above the door jingled and Rosa looked up to see an elderly couple entering the garage. "I have customers arriving. I need to go." "Understood," Hayes replied. "Donovan will check in later today." The morning passed in a blur of oil changes, tire rotations, and battery replacements. Rosa found herself scrutinizing each customer, wondering if they were part of the investigation or just ordinary people with car troubles. By lunchtime, she was mentally exhausted from the constant vigilance. As she was washing grease from her hands, the door opened again. A woman in her early 30s walked in, dressed in jeans and a faded t-shirt with a toddler balanced on her hip. "Are you Rosa?" she asked, looking harried. "My car just died in your parking lot. I was on my way to my son's doctor appointment." Rosa dried her hands and followed the woman outside. A blue minivan sat in the lot, steam rising from under the hood. "Let me take a look," Rosa offered, grabbing her toolbox. She popped the hood and immediately spotted the problem: a burst radiator hose. "It looks like your coolant line ruptured. I can fix it, but it'll take about an hour." "An hour?" the woman sighed, adjusting her squirming toddler. "We'll miss the appointment." "I've been waiting 3 months to see this specialist." Rosa felt a pang of sympathy. "What time is the appointment?" 2 o'clock at Children's Hospital downtown, the woman replied, checking her watch. "It's already past noon." Rosa made a quick decision. "Look, I have a loaner car you can use. I'll fix your van this afternoon and you can pick it up on your way home." Relief washed over the woman's face. "Really? That would be amazing." Rosa led her to the small office and pulled a set of keys from the desk drawer. "It's the red Civic parked by the side door. Nothing fancy, but it runs well." "I can't thank you enough," the woman said, tears in her eyes. "This appointment is really important for Tyler. He has some developmental issues, and this doctor is supposed to be the best." Rosa helped the woman transfer the child's car seat to the Civic and watched them drive away. As she turned back to examine the minivan more carefully, she noticed a dark sedan parked across the street. Agent Donovan's surveillance team, no doubt. The radiator hose was a quick fix, but as Rosa worked under the hood, she methodically checked for any signs of tampering or surveillance devices. Finding nothing unusual, she felt both relieved and disappointed. By mid-afternoon, she had completed the repair on the minivan and moved on to changing the transmission fluid in an old pickup truck. The door opened again and a man in an Air Force uniform walked in. "Technical Sergeant Luis Ortiz," he introduced himself. "I'm having trouble with my Jeep. Buddy of mine said you're the best mechanic around these parts." Signature. Rosa approached the counter, recognizing the man as one of Donovan's agents despite his perfect disguise. As she signed for the package, he quietly murmured, "Vehicle approaching from the south. Blue sedan, 2 occupants. Looks like our targets." Rosa's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral as she thanked the delivery man and placed the package on her counter. Through the front windows, she watched a blue sedan pull into her lot. A man and woman emerged. The woman was Vanessa Parker from yesterday, but without the child. The man was tall and athletic, scanning the surroundings with practiced eyes. "That's her," Rosa said quietly. "The woman who had the minivan breakdown." "We see them," Donovan confirmed in her ear. "Let them make the first move. Remember the plan." The bell jingled again as the pair entered. The woman smiled warmly. "Good morning. I just wanted to stop by and thank you again for your help yesterday. Tyler made his appointment on time." "Glad I could help." Rosa replied, returning the smile. Your van's all fixed. Radiator hose replaced and coolant refilled. It's parked out back if you'd like to take it now. That would be great, the woman said. And I brought back your loaner car. James here followed me so I wouldn't have to make 2 trips. The man nodded politely but said nothing. His eyes, Rosa noticed, were constantly moving, taking in every detail of the garage. Coffee? Rosa offered, gesturing to the pot. Just brewed a fresh batch. No, the man began, but the woman interrupted. That would be lovely, she said. Black for me. James takes cream if you have it. Rosa moved to the coffee maker, strategically positioned to give her a view of the power strip under her workbench. As she poured the coffee, she watched in the reflection of the chrome coffee machine as the man casually moved toward the bench. Busy day ahead? The woman asked, maintaining conversation as her partner slowly circled the garage. Pretty full schedule, Rosa replied, handing her a mug. Oil changes, brake job, couple of diagnostic appointments. The man had positioned himself near the workbench now, his back to Rosa as he pretended to examine some tools hanging on the wall. His hand dropped casually to his side, then slowly moved toward the power strip. Movement on the target, Rosa whispered, just loud enough for her microphone to pick up. Stand by, Donovan replied in her ear. The door burst open and 4 agents rushed in, weapons drawn. Federal agents, hands where we can see them! The woman dropped her coffee mug in shock, but the man reacted with trained precision, pulling a gun from under his jacket. Before he could aim, one of Donovan's agents fired a taser, sending him crumpling to the floor. Within seconds, both suspects were face down and handcuffed. Donovan entered last, surveying the scene with satisfaction. Vanessa Parker and James Ridley, he announced, checking their IDs. Both former military intelligence, now working for Nexus Strategic Solutions. Just as we thought, Rosa leaned against the counter, her legs suddenly wobbly as the adrenaline drained from her system. Did we get what you needed? Donovan nodded, gesturing to a tech specialist who was carefully removing the fake power strip. This device contains every piece of data they collected over the past 6 months. Names, dates, classified information, everything. It's the evidence we need to shut down the entire operation. As the suspects were led away, General Hayes entered the garage. She approached Rosa with genuine respect in her eyes. Ms. Mendez, I can't thank you enough. Your assistance has been invaluable. Rosa looked around at her garage, now filled with federal agents documenting evidence. What happens now? Now, Hayes said, you go back to being a mechanic. We'll clean up here, make sure there are no traces of our operation. By this afternoon, you can reopen as if nothing happened. Just like that? Rosa asked, surprised. Back to normal? Hayes smiled knowingly. Well, not exactly like before. We'll need to debrief you fully at the base. And there's the matter of appropriate compensation for your services. I don't need money, Rosa began, but Hayes raised a hand to stop her. It's not just about money, Ms. Mendez. Your skills and attention to detail are remarkable. The military has ongoing needs for civilian contractors with your abilities, people who can spot things others miss, who understand mechanical and electrical systems intuitively. Are you offering me a job? Rosa asked incredulously. Not full-time, Hayes clarified. You'd maintain your garage, your normal life, but occasionally when we need your specific expertise, we'd call on you. Generous consulting fees, of course, and your garage would be placed on the preferred vendors list for all military personnel at Fort Braxton. Rosa thought about her father, who had built this garage from nothing, who had taught her that fixing things was a form of service, making broken things whole again, helping people continue their journeys. I'd need to keep regular hours here, she said finally. My regular customers depend on me. Of course, Hayes agreed. We wouldn't want to disrupt your business. That's actually part of your value to us, maintaining your normal cover. My cover? Rosa repeated, raising an eyebrow. Now I'm a spy with a cover story? Donovan laughed as he rejoined them. Not a spy. Just a very observant mechanic who happens to help her country occasionally. 6 months later, Rosa was under a sergeant's pickup truck, replacing a worn universal joint, when she heard the distinctive sound of General Hayes's voice greeting her receptionist. Yes, she had a receptionist now. With the increase in business from the base, the general's boots appeared beside the truck as Rosa slid out from underneath. Good afternoon, Ms. Mendez, Hayes said formally, though a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. I wonder if you might have time to look at my vehicle today. It's making an unusual noise. Rosa recognized the code phrase immediately. She wiped her hands on a shop rag and nodded. I think I can fit you in, General. Let's take a look. As they walked outside together, Rosa realized she had found a new purpose, still fixing things, still using the skills her father had taught her, but now in service to something bigger than herself. She was still just a mechanic, but she had discovered that sometimes the simplest skills could solve the most complex problems, and that was something her father would have been proud of.